Welcome to the second part of our series on the Halloween franchise. I'm your trick-or-treating host, Dom, and we have a lot to unpack in the next three films we're going to talk about. Collectively, these films have been called the Thorn Trilogy. But first, I want to get you all up to speed on where everything is behind the scenes. Previously, on Halloween, in the first episode of our look into the night he came home, he being the Shape, Michael Myers, we see how a young boy kills his older sister and after years of being in a mental institution breaks out. He is pursued by his doctor, Sam Loomis, who's obsessed with taking down the evil he sees in the escapee. The Shape would go on a rampage, murdering young women as they babysit, and only one would survive. The next film would continue the night of terror as the survivor, Laurie Strode, would be taken to a hospital. Dr. Loomis is still on pursuit since he's shot Myers 6 times, but did not take him down. Eventually, we learn that Laurie is Myers' sister, and everything leads to the hospital. Here, the Shape is pursuing Laurie. As she meets Loomis, they are cornered in an operating room. Laurie shoots out Michael's eyes, and Loomis distracts him by turning on the flammable gases. Telling Laurie to leave, Loomis flicks on his lighter, and boom! The room explodes. As Laurie hides, the Shape walks out on fire and falls to the ground, consumed by fire. In the third film, we follow Dr. Chalice as he and the daughter of a deceased patient, Ellie, investigate a small town that makes masks. The owner of the mask factory, Connell Cochran, has stolen parts of Stonehenge and placed them in the children's masks and intends to use a broadcast to make a large sacrifice for the Samhain. Dr. Chalice is able to destroy Cochran, his factory, and his android army, but must try to get the broadcast pulled. That is where we left the series. Maybe dead, maybe still some life, but where do you go from there? The anthology format did not keep the momentum, but how do you resurrect the Shape? Will Laurie be back for more mayhem and carnage? These are the questions that the producers, directors, and audiences asked themselves in the mid-80s. Now let's piece together all of this to find out the next chapters of the Halloween franchise. Reviving the Shape. After Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, executive producer Mustafa Akkad wanted to move further with the series and bring back Michael Myers. Producer Paul Freeman, a friend of Akkad, with a long list of credits to his name, explained to Fangoria magazine in 1988 that everybody came out of Halloween 3 saying, "Where's Michael?" John Carpenter was approached by Cannon Films, who had just finished 1986's release of The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, to write and direct Halloween 4. Deborah Hill planned to produce the film, while Carpenter teamed up with Dennis Etchison, who, under the pseudonym Jack Martin, had written novelizations of both Halloween 2 and Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, to write a script for Halloween 4. Originally, Joe Dante was Carpenter's choice in mind for the director of the project. Etchison would explain his version of Halloween 4, quote, "One day out of the blue, I got a call from somebody at John's office who said, 'John Carpenter would like to meet with you.' Well, that was good news because I was a great fan of his. And I said, sure. I went the next day and met with him and Deborah Hill. Deborah took me into another room and sat me down, said they needed a novelization for The Fog. Somebody else had written one, but she didn't like it, and they weren't going to use it. She said he, the other writer, had a reporter having sex with ghosts on the beach. It's terrible. We don't have much time, and we need someone to do it, and someone recommended you. I'm very visual when I write, and I didn't want to visualize it in any way that was different from the film. At some point in the next few days, Tommy Wallace, I think, showed me a couple of reels of it, The Fog, the opening, so I could get the flavor and the look of it. Then I got a copy of the script, and I studied that. The deal with Bantam Books was that they needed it in exactly 6 weeks. And I said, okay, I can do that. So I signed and started, and I finished it in 6 days, or 6 weeks to the day. The Fog went through 8 printings. It did well. John asked if I'd like to novelize Halloween 2 and then Halloween 3, and so I did those. At some point after Halloween 3, on Christmas Eve, I got a call from John, and he said, Deborah and I would like you to write the script for Halloween 4. I said, that's wonderful. A few minutes later, Deborah called and said the same exact thing, and I was just ecstatic. I started meeting with John, and we talked about what would it be. We agreed that should start 10 years after Halloween, and the story would concern the 2 little kids Laurie Strode was babysitting, who were now teenagers, growing up and still living in the street from each other, across the street from each other. Lindsay Wallace and Tommy Doyle. The idea is that the town, after all those terrible murders 10 years earlier, has banned Halloween. They don't recognize Halloween as a holiday. They don't allow Halloween masks and costumes or Halloween candy. And you know, Hunt, the deputy from the first 2 films, Hunt is now a sheriff. And 10 years of repression and suppression have boiled to the surface, and there are some hints that he's back. So I foresaw on the poster the words, the night he came home again. And I had the set piece in mind where Michael comes bursting out of a big lot full of pumpkins, erupting out of this orange mound. That would be a nice shot to use on the poster. At one point, there was a speech. They have a town meeting, and everyone is up in arms on whether they should have Halloween or not. And the guy who runs the local drive-in, the Lost River, which is the real name of a real drive-in. John grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and he said there was a real Lost River drive-in. And Haddonfield was also based on a town in New Jersey where Deborah grew up. So there's this town meeting where everyone is arguing, and the guy who runs the drive-in says, you can't ban the night of Halloween movies. I'm trying to make a living here. Kids want to see horror movies. Well, maybe they shouldn't, some people are saying. Maybe it's better if they don't see them. So the whole idea was repression versus acknowledging the bad things in the world. A few weeks later, I stopped by Deborah Hill's office to pick up a copy of the final retyping of the script. She had a tall stack of them in front of her and said, we're sending these out to the investors. And then sometime later, I got a call from her saying, I just wanted to tell you, John and I have sold our interests in the Halloween franchise. And unfortunately, your script was not part of the deal. Who knows why? Apparently, the partners hired something like 10 other writers to work on it after me, and I lost the Writers Guild arbitration over the credits, even though I was the first writer on the project, so my name's not on the picture. The script that Etchison wrote explores the trauma that night dealt on Haddonfield, and if it's better to forget or to confront the horror of the past. The story focuses on Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace, the kids Laurie Strode was babysitting. And while Lindsay can't remember that night, Tommy has been scarred by it. Lindsay's overprotective mother tries to keep them apart, but they become drawn to each other. The script also questions if Loomis's treatment of Michael was partially responsible for his rampage, with an old videotape showing the late doctor ranting at a young Michael during a therapy session, labeling him a monster. Etchison plays up the mystery of whether Michael is somehow alive, if the unseen killer is a copycat, or someone is possessed by his spirit. In the end, it is revealed that Myers has become a phantom, who's able to regrow lost fingers and withstand gunshots, plus he even grows to 12 feet in the finale. He goes on a rampage at the drive-in, which happens to be showing Carpenter's Fog and Christine, and some shade is thrown at his rival, Jason Voorhees, with an image of the hockey mask killer turning to flame as Michael is framed by the burning screen. Akkad rejected the Etchison script, calling it too cerebral, and insisting that any new Halloween sequel must feature Myers as a flesh and blood killer. In an interview, Etchison explained how he received the phone call informing him of the rejection of the script. Etchison said, I received a call from Deborah Hill. She said, Dennis, I just want you to know that John and I have sold our interest in the title, Halloween, and unfortunately, your script was not part of the deal. Carpenter and Hill had signed all their rights away to Akkad, who gained ownership, and Akkad said, I just went back to the basics of Halloween on Halloween 4, and it was the most successful. As Carpenter refused to continue his involvement with the series, a new director was sought out. Dwight H. Little, a native of Ohio, replaced Carpenter.
10 years ago, on the night of October 31st, a small Midwestern town fell victim to an escaped killer. Under the cover of darkness, he carried out the most horrifying mass murder on record. 16 people in cold blood. Ever since that night, no one has forgotten his name. And Halloween has never been the same. Now, Michael Myers has come home. He has returned for one more night of unholy terror.
Michael!
Somebody help me!
He's here to kill that little girl and anybody who gets in his way.
Oh, God!
Who's gonna be next?
Halloween 4, the return of Michael Myers.
Maybe nobody knows how to stop him.
On October 30th, 1988, Michael Myers, played by George P. Wilbur, who has been comatose for 10 years since the explosion at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, is being transferred to Smiths Grove Sanitarium by ambulance. The EMTs are moving Myers from his current residence in the Ridgemont Federal Sanitarium and discuss Laurie Strode's daughter. Upon hearing that he has a niece, Myers awakens and kills the ambulance personnel, causing the vehicle to crash into a river. Michael escapes and makes his way to Haddonfield. Michael's former psychiatrist, Dr. Samuel Loomis, who is continuing to be played by the excellent Donald Pleasance, learns of his escape and gives chase. Michael comes across a gas station and kills the mechanic by stabbing him in the chest. Loomis follows Michael to the gas station and eatery, where he finds Michael has killed the mechanic for his clothes. Loomis goes into the eatery and finds a female clerk dead. Myers stands across from Loomis, who fires after Michael and chases him as he escapes in a tow truck. As he drives away, Myers causes the gas pumps to explode, and in the process destroys Loomis's car and disables the phone lines. Loomis catches a ride to Haddonfield to continue pursuing Michael. Meanwhile, Jamie Lloyd, played by Danielle Harris, Laurie Strode's daughter, is living in Haddonfield with her foster family, Richard and Darlene Carruthers, and their teenage daughter, Rachel, played by Ellie Cornell. Jamie has nightmares about Michael. Though she knows of her uncle, she does not realize that he is the figure in said nightmares. On Halloween night, Richard and Darlene go to a party and leave Rachel to babysit, forcing her to cancel a date with her boyfriend Brady. After school, Jamie is teased by other children, so Rachel takes Jamie to buy ice cream and a Halloween costume. Michael arrives in Haddonfield and steals a mask from the same store that Jamie and Rachel are visiting. He almost attacks Jamie, but flees when she screams. That night, as Rachel takes Jamie trick-or-treating, Michael breaks into the house and finds photos of Laurie in Jamie's bedroom. Loomis arrives in Haddonfield and warns the new sheriff, Ben Meeker, played by Bo Starr, that Michael has returned. Michael heads to the power station and kills the worker by throwing him into a transformer, plunging the town into darkness. Michael then attacks the police station, killing every officer inside. A lynch mob is formed by the townspeople to kill Michael. Rachel discovers Brady cheating on her with Sheriff Meeker's daughter, Kelly, and loses track of Jamie. After being chased by Michael, Rachel finds Jamie. Sheriff Meeker and Loomis arrive and take the girls to the sheriff's house, where Brady is with Kelly, along with the deputy. They barricade the house, and Loomis departs to look for Michael. Brady tries to talk to Rachel, but she refuses to speak with him. Michael sneaks into the house and kills the deputy and Kelly. Rachel and Jamie flee to the attic, while Brady stays to fend off Michael, and is killed when Michael snaps his neck. The girls climb through a window onto the roof, and Jamie's lowered down safely. But Michael attacks Rachel and knocks her off the roof, rendering her unconscious. Pursued by Michael, Jamie runs and finds Loomis. They take shelter in the school, but Michael appears and throws Loomis through a glass door, then chases Jamie through the building. Jamie trips and falls down a flight of stairs. Rachel reappears and subdues Michael with a fire extinguisher, and he escapes. The lynch mob arrives, and 4 of the men agree to drive the girls to the next town. Along the way, they meet up with the state police en route to Haddonfield. Michael, who hid under the truck, climbs aboard and kills the 4 men. Rachel takes the wheel, throws Michael off the truck, and then rams into him, casting him into a ditch near an abandoned mine. Sheriff Meeker, Loomis, the remaining lynch mob, and the state police arrive. Jamie approaches Michael and touches his hand, and he rises. Meeker, the state police, and the lynch mob shoot Michael until he falls down into the mine. Loomis and Meeker take Jamie and Rachel back home. As Darlene goes upstairs to run a bath for Jamie, she is suddenly attacked. When Loomis investigates, he finds an emotionless Jamie holding a pair of bloody scissors and wearing a clown costume and mask on top of the stairs, reminiscent of Michael when he killed his own sister. Loomis screams "no" repeatedly and attempts to shoot Jamie, but Meeker stops him. Loomis sinks to the floor and begins sobbing as Rachel, Richard, and Meeker stare in horror, realizing that the evil inside of Michael has now influenced Jamie. Okay, so let's get into some trivia about the film. A scene was filmed to bridge the story with Halloween 2. It was a flashback to the finale of Part 2, with a scene where Loomis is being tended by paramedics when he sees the burning body of the Shape. Loomis exclaims to the EMS technicians to let him burn, but they douse the flaming body of Myers despite his pleas. A similar moment occurs in Halloween Kills, where Laurie says, "Let it burn," after she sets her house on fire, with Michael trapped at the end of Halloween, the 2018 continuation. Which, I mean, I'm not saying that they pulled directly from that, but it was like, wow, that's like, I mean, it's just similar in that, like, let him burn, whatever. They didn't like. I'm 100% sure they didn't like dig through this, and that's where they got the idea. Because I mean it's a similar concept to like just let him burn and die, right? And then I think in Kills is where when they're leaving the house and they see the firefighters and everything get to the house and they're just like let it burn, or whatever. Danielle Harris revealed in 25 Years of Terror, which was a documentary, when her character runs through the neighborhood screaming for help, someone legitimately called the cops. I was banging on doors, yelling for someone to help me, after I got lost trick-or-treating or something. So, 4 o'clock in the morning, they're hearing a little girl screaming up the streets, and someone called the cops. The cops came, then the story ended up in the Inquirer that I was almost kidnapped off the set, which is kind of funny because it's like, no, this is just part of the scene. And I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't have gone through the neighborhood, because I'm pretty sure, like, at least what I've been taught on set is you should go through the neighborhood and just explain to them, hey, we're going to be shooting something either at this house, this location, or in the neighborhood or on the street. So just in case you hear any noise or ruckus, just know that it's us. You can always come and talk to us about it, and we can bring the noise level down or whatever, especially 4 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, because I mean, I would maybe do the same thing, because it's like you're hearing someone yelling for help, especially a little girl, and you're like, well, what the hell's happening out there? Yeah, you would get the cops involved, but I don't know why they didn't have somebody on set, to put to kind of maybe like a line producer or something to kind of put out those kinds of fires. The girl Lindsay who drove Rachel and Jamie to the discount mart was going to be revealed as Lindsay Wallace from Halloween, the original one, and have a larger part in the film as Rachel's friend and helping her babysit Jamie. but that was cut for budgetary reasons. The third boy hanging out with Brady and Wade in the drugstore was meant to be Tommy Doyle from the original film. Well, not that last part, but the first part. I always thought that in this film because her name was Lindsay, so I always assumed this was the same Lindsay. And like knowing now that they were going to go with the whole story about Tommy and Lindsay and like them dealing with the aftermath of like that the original night would have made a little bit more. I don't know if it would have made a little more sense. I mean, kind of, because now you had to create this whole like, oh, he has to kill his family type of thing. But whatever, we'll get to that. But that's what I always thought when I saw the character and I heard her name was Lindsay. That's I had just automatically put those pieces together. So I mean, I guess maybe then they just got rid of that. Well, I mean, they obviously did. They just got rid of that plot thread. But it would have been more interesting to see like, you know, Lindsay's point of view in this film and her kind of reliving like the trauma of the night before, the night that happened like 10 years before. Something had to be done to acknowledge the improbability of Dr. Loomis's survival from Halloween 2. So the filmmakers gave him some burn scars on his hand and the right side of his face. Halfway through production, Pleasance's girlfriend watched some of the dailies with him and rather bluntly, but accurately, blurted out, "Look, Donald, you got an egg on the side of your face." From that point forward, the makeup was toned down with all the scenes refilmed that looked that way. Still, an editing error resulted in some of the old footage making it into the finished film, which is why Loomis's scars seem to change from shot to shot in certain scenes. And I always thought, yeah, maybe he should have. I mean, maybe it's maybe it's more me and seeing the second one and then seeing this one, and I always thought he should have more burn. Like maybe it should be a little bit more. I mean, I get why you tone it down because you don't want it to be too ridiculous, but at the same time, like, isn't that the point? Like, this man survived like a burning building. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone comes away with like all these burns, but like the only thing we see really is part of his face, and then his hand, like one of his hands. It's like, shouldn't he? I don't know. I feel like it should be a little bit more, and it would be like more of like this idea of like he's becoming the monster too. Like his obsession with taking down Michael is causing him to become a monster. I always thought that was interesting too, but I don't know. I guess, yeah, audiences, I guess, would be a little understandably upset that it's like, oh, oh my God, look at what they made of Donald Pleasance. But whatever. In the original script, Sheriff Meeker was killed in a battle with Michael in the basement where the furnace was knocked over and caused the house to catch on fire. Originally, the house was to be up in flames during the infamous rooftop scene. This was eliminated just due to budgetary constraints, and Sheriff Meeker was kept alive, which is pretty good because I mean, especially we'll see for the next one, it's a good continuation to keep characters through. I always think, especially in films, like you bring them back, even if they have a smaller role or maybe a bigger role, like you can always change it up, but just keeping the continuity of that Sheriff Meeker is still alive between the two films works, I think, pretty well. And I'm not sure why you would kill him off. They didn't kill off Sheriff Brackett in the first or the second one, so they did kind of move him aside in the second one, but it's like whatever. Similar to Halloween 2, this film was originally made in the mostly bloodless spirit of the original. Then the producers freaked out, demanded more gore. So suddenly Michael needed to stick his thumb through someone's head, rip another guy's throat out, and stab someone with a crowbar. Mustafa Khan, famously squeamish about blood in real life, was on set for the reshoot shouting, "More blood, more blood, more blood." And I don't know. I mean, I understand where, especially through the 80s, where the slasher films, kind of ramped up more and more and more, and you needed more gore, and you needed more of this, you need more of that. And the idea, though, that because especially with the original one, like I said, you know, it doesn't need Halloween doesn't need gore, doesn't need to be too, but it is like when you get further along, you do need more and more brutality, especially if you want to show that this character is, especially we'll get later into the newer films, like they make him more brutal and more. It's all about like that, but for the Michael that they were going for in these films, I think it didn't need to be that gory, but whatever. I mean, I love it still, but I can see where, yeah, you come in and you're like, well, this needs to be to rival like Freddy, to rival Jason, all of them. You need to amp up things. You gotta kill more people. You gotta show more blood. So I can see why. And so now Michael Myers is back. Halloween 4 opened in just over 1,600 theaters on October 21st, 1988, and grossed just under $7 million dollars in its opening weekend, ranking number one at the box office. It held the top spot in its second weekend and achieved a total domestic gross of $17 million dollars in the United States, becoming the sixth best performing film in the Halloween series. The film garnered a negative critical reception upon release, and it currently has 33% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's based off of 30 reviews with an average rating of 4.1 out of 10. The consensus from critics reads Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, may bring the series' mass killer back to the fold, but fails to offer the visceral scares and inventiveness of the original. On Metacritic, it has a 34 out of 100, but that's based off of 10 critics score reviews, which indicates generally unfavorable reviews. With those box office numbers, though, Akkad looked to fast track the sequel, and oh man, it's a doozy. After the success of the previous installment, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, development on a fifth Halloween was fast-tracked to meet a preset release date of October 1989. Akkad turned to Halloween 4 writer and director Alan B. McElroy and Dwight H. Little to return for their respective duties on the fifth film. However, both declined. Ramsey Thomas assumed producing responsibilities from the fourth film's Paul Freeman, and opted to hire playwright Shem Bitterman as screenwriter. Bitterman's script, entitled Halloween 5, The Killer Inside Me, which was written in the span of 3 days, featured an evil Jamie Lloyd and a resurrected Michael Myers once again. However, Akkad was adamant about making Myers the sole antagonist of the film. Nevertheless, Bitterman penned a second draft by February 1989, and Jeff Burr, director of From a Whisper to a Scream, was being courted to helm the film. Burr's producing partners Darren Scott and William Burr were also in the mix to co-produce alongside Thomas. The directing job was seemingly Burr's until series co-creator Deborah Hill met director Dominique Othenin-Girard at the 1989 Sundance Film Festival and recommended him to Akkad. After being instated as director, he infamously threw Bitterman's draft into the trash in front of Akkad. He brought in Robert Harders of Home Movies to write an entirely new draft, which saw a Frankenstein-inspired story where Myers is resurrected and no longer evil, but is pursued by an angry mob. Harders pictured the movie opening on Michael's body, which was brought back to life by lightning at the bottom of the mine shaft he fell into during Halloween 4's finale. The writer pictured Michael as Frankenstein's monster, and when he's resurrected, the evil that once poisoned him has gone. He's now a gentle creature. But of course, being Michael Myers, the locals want to destroy him. It's up to Dr. Loomis to save him, who recognizes that maybe there's a chance to reach the humanity inside the patient he's spent the last 3 movies trying to destroy. Michael would have killed people, of course, but only in self-defense, before he's finally destroyed in the finale. It certainly would have made for a departure from the series norm, which is why Akkad rejected it, fearing fans wouldn't accept it. With Harder's pitch rejected, leading Elton and Gerard to pitch a new concept with co-writer Michael Jacobs. The duo's script was initially titled Halloween 5 and Things That Go Bump in the Night. After reviewing the screenplay, director Elton and Gerard added Jamie's inability to speak to the draft, along with the supernatural plot device of her telepathic visions connected to Michael. Another departure from previous films in the series with Elton and Gerard's attempt to persuade the audience to relate to the Michael Myers character, whom he intended to appear more human, even vulnerable with contradicting feelings inside of him. That's a quote from him, Elton and Gerard. He illustrated these feelings with the scenes where Michael removes his mask and shed a tear. Gerard explained, again, to humanize him, to give him a tear. If evil, or in this case, our boogeyman, knows pain or love, or demonstrates a feeling of regret, he becomes more scary to me if he pursues his malefic action. He shows an evil determination beyond those feelings. Dr. Loomis tries to reach his emotional side several times in the film. He thinks he could cure Michael through his feelings. In the original closing scene, after Jamie finds that Michael has escaped from the police station, she is approached by a black-cloaked figure. At the time of filming, it's unknown who this figure was. It would only be expanded on and explained in the subsequent film, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, and the scene in question was attached to the beginning of the producer's cut of that film as a flashback. Though the cuts made to the beginning and ending of the film largely diminish this subplot, the Man in Black character still appears momentarily on several occasions in the film, which led to some confusion among audiences upon its original release. So what did we get from all this development between the last film and trying to get things out quickly? Well, let's see what we got.
Sheriff, they want you down at the cemetery.
Today in the cemetery, somebody dug up a coffin. It was a coffin of a 9-year-old girl. You've come back to us, Michael.
When are they going to realize that she is not him? She's just a child.
They know that Michael Myers is her uncle, and that she attacked her stepmother. That's why they fear her, especially on Halloween. You're afraid. You're afraid the whole thing might start to happen again. How many people did he kill last year? Have you forgotten? But you never looked into his face, did you? You never saw his eyes. You never saw that nothing, no expression, blank. My memory goes back 12 years. I prayed that he would burn in hell. But in my heart, I knew that hell would not have him. Michael Myers is outside.
The National Guard will take him to a maximum security facility, where he'll stay till the day he dies.
Never die.
The film opens on October 31st, 1988. Michael Myers is shot and falls down a salt mine shaft. Sheriff Ben Meeker, the lynch mob of Hannafield's truckers, and the state police toss down dynamite to finish him off. Escaping into a nearby creek before the dynamite explodes, Michael stumbles upon an elderly hermit. Michael attacks, but Michael faints. The hermit nurses him back to health after he falls into a coma. The next year, October 30th, 1989, Michael, this time played by Don Shanks, awakens. He stabs the hermit to death with his knife and returns to Haddonfield to find his niece, Jamie Lloyd, again, who narrowly avoided being killed by him the year prior. Jamie, continued to be played by Danielle Harris, has been admitted to the Haddonfield Children's Clinic after having attacked her foster mother. Jamie has been rendered mute due to psychological trauma, suffering from nightmares, seizures, and exhibits signs of a telepathic link with her uncle. Dr. Sam Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance once again, becomes aware of Jamie's psychic link with Michael and tries to convince Sheriff Meeker, still played by Bo Starr, that Michael is still alive. Meanwhile, Jamie's foster sister Rachel, once again played by Allie Cornell, visits Jamie in the hospital. She goes back to her empty house and takes a shower. She begins to feel as though someone is in the house and finds her dog missing. She calls the cops, and a pair of bungling cops come to check the house. Her dog runs up to as they tell Rachel that the house is clear. After everyone leaves, Michael breaks into the house and stabs Rachel to death. Michael begins stalking Rachel's friend, Tina, played by Wendy Kaplan. After meeting with her boyfriend, Mike, Michael kills him as he cleans his car. Myers takes the mask Mike was going to wear and poses as him. Michael picks up Tina, and he stays silent as they stop at a gas station. Tina exits the car, and Jamie senses Michael waiting for Tina, and partially regains her ability to speak, tells Loomis and Meeker where she is located. By the time the cops arrive, Michael is gone. Loomis tells Tina to stay with the police, but she refuses. Later that night, Tina and her friends Sam and Spitz go to a Halloween party at a farm. Sensing that Tina is in danger, Jamie goes to warn her. While Sam and Spitz are having sex in the barn, Michael impales Spitz with a pitchfork and decapitates Sam with a scythe. Tina finds the bodies and goes to warn the nearby police deputies, but finds that Michael has already killed them. Tina flees, but Jamie and her friend Billy Hill, a fellow patient from the clinic, arrive. Michael begins chasing Jamie in a car, but crashes into a tree. Michael exits the car, and Tina sacrifices herself to allow Jamie and Billy time to escape. Loomis arrives, and Jamie finally agrees to help him stop Michael for good. With Jamie's help, Loomis and Meeker have created a setup at the old Myers house to lure him back into his abandoned childhood home. Suddenly, the police receive a call saying Michael has broken into the clinic, which prompts Meeker and most of the officers to leave. However, this call is merely a diversion. Michael appears and kills the trooper sitting in the patrol car outside before entering the house. Loomis tries to reason with him, but Michael slashes him and throws him over the stair banister. Michael kills Deputy Block, who was protecting Jamie before chasing her throughout the house. Jamie hides in a laundry chute, but is forced to abandon it when Michael stabs and injures her. Fleeing upstairs, Jamie finds the bodies of Max the dog, Rachel, and Mike in the attic. Michael finds Jamie and attempts to kill her, but stops when Jamie addresses him as uncle, and he removes his mask. When Jamie touches his face, he goes into a fit of rage and chases her again. Jamie heads downstairs and finds Loomis. Loomis uses Jamie to lure Michael into a trap, shooting him with a tranquilizer gun and dropping a steel net onto him. He beats the trapped, drugged Michael unconscious with a wooden plank until he eventually suffers from a stroke and collapses on top of Michael. Meeker and the rest of the police return shortly thereafter, and Michael is then taken into custody. Meeker assures Jamie that Michael, who is locked up in a cell, will remain in prison until he dies. Jamie doesn't believe him, however, and remarks that Michael will never die. One of the officers goes to bring Jamie home when the mysterious man in black, who has been searching for Michael, arrives and causes an explosion at the police station. The officer, hearing gunfire, rushes back inside after warning Jamie to stay with the car. When the other officer doesn't return, Jamie goes back inside to investigate and finds the station destroyed from the explosion, along with Meeker and several of his men dead. Jamie discovers Michael's cell empty and the back door of the police station broken open, causing her to break down in tears as she realizes Michael's free again to continue terrorizing Haddonfield. Let's get into a little bit of trivia for this film. The film's original screenplay featured a young hermit who takes in the injured Michael at the beginning of the film, whose shack is filled with ancient ruins, tablets, and other occult items used to perform necromancy. Though initially filmed as such, with Theron Reed playing the young man who was known as Dr. Death, the sequence was later reshot featuring an older actor, and the occult paraphernalia and theme removed. In subsequent years, the original footage featuring Reed was thought to be lost. This original sequence had been intended to set the groundwork for a subplot that had Michael Myers under the curse of Thorn, controlled by a cult devoted to this ancient ruin. The lost sequence was discovered and included in the bonuses of the DVD and Blu-ray. Yeah, honestly, I need to go back and check this out because that's awesome that they were able to find it. I love when, there's pieces of media, film, not just film, just anything, where it's thought to be lost and we finally find it. Like someone had recorded or somebody had saved a copy, or all these things, because it's always great to just see like what could have been. And then sometimes it's like kind of like why did they take it out? Like sometimes it's for like pacing, sometimes it just kind of derails certain other things that they were doing, so then they end up like reshooting it or just cutting it out entirely. But this is one thing that I really love, and I'd love to go back and view. Donald Pleasance was very vocal about his dissatisfaction with the story and with the way director Dominique Othenin-Girard was trying to get him to play Dr. Loomis as totally heavy and overbearing. Pleasance also felt that the success and the shock ending of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, was not being capitalized on. Further, Pleasance said he felt like Loomis died after taking down Michael in the finale, and that would be the last of his character, although he would be very wrong. And you can kind of see that in the way he's acting in that scene. It's meant to kind of give this like finality of this character who he's been hunting and trying to stop, this person that he sees more as a thing, as just a vessel for evil. And finally his character just is able to take him down and he can just let go. And you kind of see that in the way he kind of like breathes out and he just lowers his head onto his chest, and we don't see him the rest of the film. Because, honestly, it kind of feels like that way, but obviously that's not the way Akkad wanted things to go, and we'll see that for the next one. Don Shanks was injured when he was filming the scene where the shape crashes Mike's Camaro into the tree. Dominique Othenin-Girard forgot to yell "cut," and fire was beginning to emerge from the car. Shanks, who was not wearing flame retardant clothing, claims that he was told not to leave the total automobile until the director said "cut," and decided to stay inside the vehicle for about a minute because the director had not done so. Shanks puts this down to Othenin-Girard being sidetracked by seeing stunts take place during his first major directing job. It turns out he was so shocked by the realism of the wreck that he had forgotten to shout "cut." Finally, stunt coordinator Don Pike told Othenin-Girard to yell "cut," and did so just in time for Shanks to leave the wreckage, which is pretty messed up. And yeah, that screws everything up if you're like not paying attention and you're not yelling "cut," because yeah, people are going to do that. Like actors will do that. They will stay in character because they're thinking, oh, he's wanting to let it breathe, or he's wanting to see, like, let it live out more, or like just get a better reaction or something or whatever. And yeah, when you're not yelling "cut," it's not a great thing. It just goes to show you like this director's ineptitude. The Jamie Lloyd character has a striking parallel to the Tommy Jarvis character from the Friday the 13th series. Both characters appeared in the 4th, 5th, and 6th films of their respective series, They were both about the same age in their first appearance. They both become institutionalized and develop homicidal tendencies themselves after the killer. In this film, Jamie starts out as a mute. In the fifth, Friday the 13th, Tommy rarely speaks. At the end of that film, Tommy is seen holding a knife, essentially becomes Jason. At the end of the previous Halloween, Jamie is seen holding a pair of scissors, and she essentially becomes Michael. And I mean, I can kind of see that. It's kind of crazy that they. I mean, they probably did take a little bit from Friday the 13th, and I can see where they kind of were leading with Jamie a little bit more than Tommy, because a lot of the stuff with Tommy was a lot of like red herring stuff in the I think it was the fifth one, because it was like, oh, is he Jason? Oh, is it him the whole time? This and that, blah blah blah. But then they never like pulled the trigger on that. Same thing with this, where it's like keeps you guessing, like, is she going to? Well, at least just the fourth ending to this one, but nothing else about that was like, oh, is she the one killing? Like that would have been interesting if this one was more like that, where it had you guessing, like, is she the one who's killing these people? Is she, like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's a little kid, but you never know, right? Like we've seen this, we've seen that before, and in other like movies and movie series. So that would have been an interesting way to have done this, where it's like Michael is back, he is killing, but they're like Loomis and everyone else is thinking it's her. That would have made for an interesting film. In the script, Rachel had Tina's role and Tina had Rachel's, with a vast change in character for Rachel. Also, the script had a scene in the Myers house that had the shape fall through the floor into a cage in the basement, and the end had Michael escaping with Sheriff Meeker, finding an empty cell, and other drafts had Meeker dying. Mustafa Akkad has said one of the biggest regrets about the film was killing off the character of Rachel. In retrospect, he would have kept her alive, but but she was killed in an attempt to show that no one, not even Rachel, was safe from Michael, which is ridiculous because you could have shown that in so many other ways. You could have like just showing like him like stalking her, but not like actually killing her. Like you could have shown her escaping, like some way of escaping, right? Like that shows that dang, she's still in danger. Like she can be killed too. Like I get where you're going for that character, but then you end up getting rid of one of the best characters from like the previous film, and like one that ties emotionally the most to the main character of Jamie, and you're bringing in a new character that we're supposed to feel for, but we've never like seen her before. It's ridiculous that like I don't I can see why he regret it. I don't know why you would kill off Rachel's character. Like I get, like I completely understand why, like, because yeah, like you want to show like, like no one's safe, but you could do it in other ways. You could have killed off Loomis. That would have been a way to show like, dang, like he's been around since the first one. He survived the first, second, third, first, second, and then fourth, and then this one he dies. Or you show like the sheriff get killed or something, like someone who survived before. That's like, but not, I would say, yeah, like that's one character I would say you should have kept. Kind of a little disappointing, like when you look back too, because it was like she was able to fight off Michael in the fourth film, and then all of a sudden like her character just like goes out the window. In the laundry chute scene, Jamie was originally stabbed in the leg, but the shot was cut from the film because the MPAA deemed it too disturbing. Danielle Harris kept the prosthetic leg used for the cut scene for several years until she gave it to a cousin who lost it. That's a little disappointing. That like I know she had the clown costume, but then I think she eventually sold that. But the MPAA, like, especially at that time, because they were so fatigued with slashers, I could see why they'd just be like, no, you have to cut that. You have to cut this. And especially when it's like child endangerment like that. Well, I mean, I'm not saying that they did, but like when it's showing like this, that's where they get a little bit more scared and they're like more like lean towards like, oh, we're gonna give you an R rating, an NC-17 rating, something like that. But I still don't think that. I think that was a little too far. That's too far to push like for something that would cause it to get like an NC-17 or rated X. I think at the time it would have been rated X if they would have gone for it, but we're kind of over the top. Halloween 5 opened theatrically in North America on October 13th, 1989. It earned $5.1 million in its opening weekend, ranking number 4 in the box office for the United States. It continued to screen throughout November 1989 with a reported earning of just under 450,000 during the weekend of November 3rd, 1989, showing on 537 screens. The film's theatrical run lasted 3 months, concluding in December 1989, with an ultimate gross of $11.6 million domestically. Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers is the lowest grossing Halloween film and marks the second low point in the series after Halloween 3. Most fans of the series look to Dominique Othenin-Girard's direction as the cause of the missteps of this film, and I'm inclined to agree. The dropping of Jamie's turn to evil, the addition of a psychic link between Jamie and Michael, the inclusion of the Man in Black, leaving this plot thread to be resolved by the next writer and director, kind of ridiculous. Akkad rushing into production also contributed to this mess of a movie, and due to that, the next film goes into production hell. After the less than enthusiastic response to Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers, which came out only a year after Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers, producer Mustafa Akkad put the series on hold to reevaluate its potential. Akkad felt Halloween 5 had strayed too far from Halloween 4, and the box office response was much lower than expected. As early as 1990, both Danielle Harris and Don Shanks were expected to return as Jamie Lloyd and The Shape, with the possibility of Donald Pleasance and Wendy Kaplan reprising their roles as well. That same year, screenwriter and longtime Halloween fan Daniel Farrands set out to write the 6th entry in the Halloween series. Farrands gave his horror film script to the producers of Halloween 5, Ramsey Thomas. Impressing him with his writing, Thomas set a meeting for Farrands with the executive producer Mustafa Akkad. Farrands described the meeting as, quote, "I spent weeks preparing for the meeting and came in with a large notebook filled with Halloween research. I had the entire series laid out in a timeline, a bio of every character, a family tree of the Myers and Strode clans, as well as all the research I had compiled about the runic symbol, Thorn, that was briefly shown in Halloween 5. I then laid out how I thought all of that might be explored in Halloween 6. Farrands, who knew the films as well as Dennis Etchison's novelizations intimately, constructed a Bible of the entire franchise and presented it to the studio. The film lingered in development as a planned October 1990 release was missed, but Akkad persisted and began courting Michelle Soavi in 1992. Soavi would reject the offer, and not long after, the producers entered a series of complicated legal battles ensued, which delayed the plans for a sequel. Eventually, Miramax Films, via its Dimension Films division, bought the rights to the Halloween series. Concurrently with the legal battle, series co-creator John Carpenter had teamed up with New Line Cinema to outbid Miramax. Carpenter's proposal saw the film take place on a space station. The idea may have been reinforced or referenced in a scene in which a conspiracy theorist calls Barry Sims' radio show ranting about the CIA launching Michael Myers into space. The rejected premise might also have inspired the plot for Jason X. Who knows? With Miramax on board, The studio hoped to start production by October 1993, but yet again, this did not materialize. Instead, Bob Weinstein hired Gary Felder to helm the film. Felder recommended Phil Rosenberg, who became the first writer hired for the film. His script, titled Halloween 666 The Origin, was as follows. Michael is homeless and lives at a shelter where he is acknowledged and known by other homeless people there, accepted because nobody knows who he really is. There are a couple of times when people know how hideously scarred his face is, even though in Halloween 5, Michael had been unmasked for the first time since the original and had been shown to have a perfectly normal face. Later, as a reference to A Clockwork Orange, 4 teens, dressed as the Droogs, beat the living hell out of Michael, only for him to put his mask on and start taking them out one by one. Tommy Doyle is an adult and the protagonist, with the notion of digging deeper into Michael's ties to the pagan origins of Halloween. We also see the idea of Haddonfield citizens rallying to bring Halloween back to their town, as the holiday has been banned since the police shootout that ended in Halloween 5. Our heroine is a Chicago reporter named Dana Childress, who is for some reason having repeated dreams of Michael and ancient druid ceremonies. Tommy Doyle is much like he's presented in the theatrical film Curse of Michael Myers, though in this script he appears to be even more of a social outcast. He's obsessed with Michael and definitely becomes our new Loomis figure throughout the script, providing even more exposition than he did in the film we eventually saw. That begs the question of what becomes of Dr. Loomis. The script brings Loomis full circle in an entirely different way by showing him as an inmate of Smith's Grove. This can be seen as polarizing to some fans, but by this point, Loomis is a man at the end of his rope. He spent years trying to reach Michael before he realized what evils he was truly capable of, and then tried his best to warn absolutely everyone around him, to no avail. The rest of Halloween 666 hinges on a crazy twist. So Dana is having these dreams about Michael Myers because she is actually his sister. This is our only major signifying connection between the two of them, and it's pretty bizarre because Laurie didn't dream about Michael before the original movie. She didn't know he was coming. Akkad hated the script and tossed it across the room after he finished reading it. However, Miramax responded favorably to Rosenberg's work and opted to continue moving forward until Felder would drop off of the film, citing creative differences. Hot off the success of Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino was approached to write and direct the film. Tarantino would decline, but instead suggested Evil Dead 2 co-writer Scott Spiegel to direct the film instead. Tarantino's planned script would have involved Michael Myers and the Man in Black fleeing Haddonfield together and going on a road trip down Route 66 while murdering people, but he was never officially hired, and Spiegel later departed the project. Tarantino's rejected idea bears a resemblance with his screenplay for Natural Born Killers, which he was pitching to Miramax Films at the same time as he was considering ideas for a screenplay for Halloween 6. According to a commentary track from the producer's cut of the film, while Tarantino was considered in early stages of production, the story that Tarantino had ever actually completed a script is an urban legend. Spiegel was unenthusiastic about Rosenberg's screenplay and struggled to perform the script polish that he was assigned. He would ultimately depart the project. By April 1994, Phil's brother, Scott Rosenberg, was tasked with revising the script, but failed to satisfy Akkad. Other concepts involved Michael being found to be Dr. Loomis' son, or Michael's mother being kept as a sex slave by the Man in Black, but honestly, those would have been horrible ideas. I'm glad they did not go with any of those ridiculous, outlandish, that's the logical next step of, where do you go from here? With Rosenberg's draft now dead in the water by the end of April, the studio pursued upcoming writers Irving Beletich and Lawrence Gutterman to completely overhaul Halloween 666. With an October 1994 release window instilled by Weinstein, Matthew Patrick of Hider in the House was selected as director. Upon his hiring, Patrick immediately flew down to Salt Lake City for location scouting and brought in his frequent cinematographer, Billy Dixon. However, neither Patrick or Akkad were appeased by the script, with the former even referring to it as unfinished. Patrick was granted his own revision of the script, but tensions arose between Akkad and Weinstein, with production gearing up to begin in 2 weeks without a finalized cast. Patrick would ultimately quit the project in May 1994. In June 1994, Franz was hired to write a new screenplay, as the film had an impending shooting date scheduled for October in Salt Lake City, Utah. At this time, Fred Walton, best known for directing When a Stranger Calls and April Fool's Day, was attached to direct the film. A deal was not reached with Walton, which led to the studio hiring Joe Chappelle after being impressed with his film debut, Thieves' Quartet. Franz had said his initial intent for the film was to bridge the later films 4 and 5 into the series to the earlier films 1 and 2, while at the same time taking the story into new territory so that the series could expand for further installments. This, in part, meant expanding on the presence of the Man in Black, as well as the appearance of the Thorn symbol, both of which appeared without explanation at the end of 5. In beginning the script, Franz contacted the writers of Halloween 4 and 5 for additional information, but they were unable to provide clear answers, leaving him to pick up the pieces. Franz expanded the Curse of Thorn plotline, in which Jamie Lloyd is kidnapped by a covert cult who has cursed Michael Myers via the runic symbol of Thorn, which compels him to kill and also affords him immortality. Franz had in part based the idea on dialogue present in Halloween 2 about the night of Samhain, during which the veil between the living and the dead is thinnest. This one time of the year during which Michael becomes active and seeks out his bloodline. References to Druidism, as well as Myers' grandfather hearing voices, had appeared in the 1978 novelization of Halloween by Curtis Richards. While the character of Jamie Lloyd dies early in the film, the initial version of Franz's script had her character surviving until the final act, at which point she would ultimately be killed by Michael. Other elements of Franz's working script that ultimately had to be trimmed down, including an extension of the Curse of Thorn subplot, which had the entire town of Haddonfield in collusion with the cult, an idea Akkad wanted to use for the series' 7th installment.
Do you know why we celebrate Halloween? A long, long time ago, it was a night of great power. When the days grew short, all across the land, huge bonfires were lit. Oh, there was a marvelous celebration, and they dressed up in costumes, hoping to ward off the evil spirits, especially the boogeyman.
On October 31st, 1989, Michael Myers and his niece, Jamie Lloyd, are abducted from the Haddonfield police station by the Man in Black. 6 years later, on October 30th, 1995, a now 15-year-old Jamie, this time played by J.C. Brandy, gives birth to a child, and the Man in Black, revealed to be the leader of a druid-like cult, takes the child away. Later, Nurse Mary, a midwife, helps Jamie escape with her child, but Michael kills the midwife. Jamie and her child flee in a stolen pickup truck, with Michael in pursuit. Michael is played by George P. Wilbur for most of the film, and by Brad Hardin for additional shots. Meanwhile, Dr. Sam Loomis, still played by Donald Pleasance in his last performance, has retired and moved to a cabin on the outskirts of Haddonfield, where he lives as a hermit. He is visited by his friend Dr. Terrence Wynn, played by Mitch Ryan, the chief administrator of Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where Michael had been incarcerated as a boy. Wynn asks Loomis to return to Smith's Grove. Jamie stops at a bus station and goes to the payphone. Jamie calls and pleads for help on a local radio station. She calls to Loomis for help, only to be ignored by the radio DJ Barry Sims. Michael catches up with Jamie, so she hides in the women's restroom. She's able to escape back to her truck, and she crashes into an old barn. Myers kills Jamie, but finds that her child is not in the truck. In Haddonfield, Tommy Doyle, played by Paul Rudd, whom Laurie Strode babysat in 1978, now lives in a boarding house run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Blankenship. Tommy is a reclusive individual who has become obsessed with finding the truth behind Michael's motives. The dysfunctional family living in the Myers house across the street are relatives of the Strode family. Kara Strode, her 6-year-old son Danny, her teenage brother Tim, caring mother Deborah, and abusive father John. Danny is being tormented by the man in black, who is grooming him to follow in Michael's footsteps, leading him to almost use a knife on John during a heated argument between him and Kara during breakfast, the latter being slapped by her father. Kara and Danny are played by Marianne Hagen and Devin Gardner, respectively. Tommy finds Jamie's baby at the bus station, takes him to the hospital. There, he runs into Loomis and tells him about the Strode family living in the Myers house. Tommy takes the baby back to his house where he names it Stephen. Loomis goes to the Strode house and alerts Deborah about Michael. While Deborah starts to pack up belongings to leave, Michael shows up and kills her. Tommy runs into Danny on the street, who is coming home from school, and takes him home. Kara returns calling for Deborah, but is unable to find her. She comes across Tommy with Danny in Danny's room. Tommy takes them to the boarding house, where he reveals to Kara that he believes Michael has been inflicted with the Thorn, an ancient druid curse that causes him to kill his bloodline on Halloween night, and believes that Jamie's baby will be Michael's final sacrifice. Later that night, Tommy meets Loomis at a Halloween party at a community college that Kara, Tim, and Tim's girlfriend, Beth, attends with DJ Barry Sims as a special guest. Meanwhile, Mrs. Blankenship reveals to Kara that she was babysitting Michael the night he killed his sister, and that Danny hears the same voice telling him to kill as Michael did, indicating the curse will pass on to Danny if Stephen is killed. Shortly after, Michael joins John, Tim, Beth, and Barry Sims. Kara follows Danny back to the Strode house after he is summoned by the man in black. There, she sees Michael and fights him off, then escapes with Danny back to the boarding house where Tommy and Loomis are waiting. To their shock, the cult has arrived there with Miss Blankenship as an ally, and the man in black is revealed to be Dr. Wynn. The cult drugs Loomis and Tommy and takes Kara, Danny, and Stephen to Smith's Grove. Kara is locked in a maximum security ward while the boys are kept in an operating room. Tommy and Loomis awaken and go to Smith's Grove. There, Loomis confronts Wynn, who reveals that the Smith's Grove staff have been working with the Thorn cult to study the power of the Thorn and learn how to control it. It is implied that Stephen is the successful result of an in vitro fertilization experiment to clone Michael's pure evil. Wynn wants Loomis to join in on his conspiracy, as he was the first to see the evil inside Michael. Loomis refuses and is knocked out by a doctor. Meanwhile, Tommy frees Kara as Michael pursues them to the sanitarium. They find Wynn and his team, who are about to perform a medical procedure on Danny and Stephen. Michael suddenly appears and turns against Wynn and the doctors, killing them all. Tommy and Kara rescue the kids, and Michael chases them through a laboratory, where Kara notices fetuses from Wynn's failed experiments. Tommy injects Michael with corrosives and beats him unconscious with a lead pipe. Tommy, Kara, and the children leave Smith's Grove while Loomis stays behind to take care of business. Inside, Michael's mask lies alone on the lab floor, and Loomis screams in the background, leaving their fates unknown. Before we move on to any trivia, I wanted to go over the producer's cut, because it is a very interesting story, and it is similar to the theatrical cut. It is a little bit different, but let's get into that. The original cut of the film that screened for test audiences prior to the reshoots became known colloquially as the producer's cut, and bootleg copies of it surfaced and were passed around among film collectors. This cut of Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, features numerous differences, ranging from different scores and musical cues to substantial shifts in plot, particularly regarding the film's conclusion. In a retrospective interview, Franz noted that the finale in this cut of the film was sufficiently creepy and gothic, but conceded that it lacked intensity, which is largely what prompted Dimension Films to begin reshoots. The producer's cut of the film garnered a cult following, according to writer Franz. It's amazing that the life that Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers has continued to have, because there's this alternate version that has been kind of in the vault all these years. I found the original trailer that used the title of Halloween 666, The Origin of Michael Myers, and I'm going to place it here as we move into the producer's cut.
Every legend is based on fact. Every myth is grounded in truth. For 17 years, the town of Haddonfield, Illinois, has been haunted by a night when evil roamed the streets and a madman ruled the night. Everyone knows his name. Now, everyone will know the truth.
I knew what he was, but I never knew why.
Halloween 6, The Origin of Michael Myers.
One of the first major differences is that the gore is toned down a lot. It feels like the first and fourth films in that regard. The first substantial difference in the producer's cut is the death of Jamie Lloyd. She does not die at the beginning of the film, but survives being stabbed by Michael in the barn. She remains in a coma and is taken to the hospital, where Loomis and Wynn visit her. Midway through the film, a gothic montage occurs, which reveals in fragmented detail the conception of Jamie's child among the cult. After the sequence, an unseen person, later revealed to be Wynn, shoots an unconscious Jamie in the head with a silenced pistol. Additionally, John's death scene in the producer's cut was shorter. In the theatrical cut, an additional shot, completed during the reshoots, was incorporated of his head graphically exploding from an electrical power surge. Other various transitional shots throughout the producer's cut version were extracted or truncated into the theatrical cut. In the finale of the producer's cut, Kara awakens at Smith's Grove Sanitarium on a concrete slab, surrounded by the cult's members, including Mrs. Blankenship, Wynn's secretary Don, the bus depot man, and Sheriff Holt. Wynn conducts a ceremony in which Michael will kill Stephen as a final sacrifice of innocent blood, after which the curse will pass on to Danny, with Kara as his first sacrifice. Kara realizes that Stephen is a product of incest between Jamie and Michael, and uses this to try and convince Michael not to kill the baby. This distracts everyone enough for Tommy to hold Wynn hostage and force the cult to free Kara. They run with the children through the sanitarium until they reach a locked gate. Tommy uses the power of the ancient runes to stop Michael in his tracks, and Loomis helps the group escape. Later, after telling the others he has unfinished business, Loomis walks back into the sanitarium to find Michael lying on the floor of the main hallway. Upon removing the mask, Loomis finds Dr. Wynn, with whom Michael switched clothes and then escaped. Wynn dies, but not before saying, "It's your game now, Dr. Loomis," and passing on the Thorn symbol, which appears on Loomis's wrist. Realizing that he himself is now to act as the leader of the cult, Loomis screams in both despair and disgust. This is heard as ambient noise in the final frame of the theatrical cut. As this happens, Michael can be seen escaping into the night in Wynn's clothes. The producer's cut remained officially unreleased for nearly 20 years. It had its first public exhibition on October 27, 2013, at the New Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles. Screenwriter Franz was present for a short Q&A in which he stressed that there was still a major push in the works to get this version a proper release. He also said that the studio allowing this version to be screened in public for the first time, and that the overwhelmingly positive response were both huge steps in the right direction. Anchor Bay Media and Scream Factory gave the producer's cut its first official release on Blu-ray, in September 2014 as part of their Halloween The Complete Collection box set. Alright, so let's get into the last bit of trivia for this film. Danielle Harris, who was 17 at the time, contacted producer Paul Freeman about reprising her role as Jamie Lloyd, and went so far as to completing paperwork to become legally emancipated in order to shoot the film. She was officially cast in the role, but Dementia Films could not come to an agreement over her salary. Harris alleges that Dimension offered her a scaled $1,000 to shoot the part over the course of a week, which was less than the amount of money she had paid for her emancipation. Franz and Freeman both had wanted Harris for the part, but at that point they had their hands tied. According to Harris, the head of the casting department refused to negotiate her salary, saying that she was a scale character who dies in the first 20 minutes. This ultimately led to her dropping out of the project. People automatically assume I wanted some crazy amount of money or something, Harris commented in 2014. But it's not like I was demanding of anything, really. When you've been asked to do something and then they insult you by saying, you're a piece of shit, you died in the first act, I don't give a fuck what, or that you were in the other 2 Halloween movies. Who cares? I was in shock. Actress J.C. Brandy was cast as Harris's replacement. And I've also read that Harris was not upset that J.C. Brandy got the part after her. I know she was like, it's not her fault that she got the part. That was all on the the casting and the producers. It was all on the higher ups. Like, she had nothing to do with it. So at least she has no ill will towards the actress who stepped in, which is good because most of the time it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with the people higher up who just are like, well, sure, just because you were in this one doesn't mean we should pay you more. And it's like ridiculous because it's like, okay, you want this person back. Obviously you wanted her back. Like, I'm not saying you should go like way above and beyond, but you should at least pay her more. Like, she got herself legally emancipated, so you didn't have to deal with, because if she was still 17, you would still have to deal with, like the limited shooting. And it would have probably cost you more because you were shooting probably like for maybe a couple of days out of the week or maybe a whole week. But think about, like, okay, so now if she's underage and you have to follow all these rules, you can't shoot all that. You have to shoot all that like in less time for a lot longer. Whereas she like went out of her way, like just I would have said pay her for the emancipation and then add a little on top. That's what you probably should have done. But I mean, it is what it is. I would have loved to see Danielle Harris back for this, but yeah, like they kind of dropped the ball on this. Fran's original script featured a much grander and deeper conspiracy story that ultimately revealed much of the town of Haddonfield was in on the mystery. He also allowed a third act for the character of Jamie that brought her face to face with the Shape once again for one final battle. Which I really think they probably should have done or gone with something along those lines. Because to kill off this character that was so important for the last 2 films, in the theatrical cut, to die at the beginning, one, is kind of like the same thing they did with Rachel, where it's like, okay, why would you? Okay, it's to show like, oh, not everyone's safe, but and like to kind of push her aside for Tommy, but then also like it would have been more like if she would have died like fighting him, more so like at the end, like okay, she's in a coma for most of the film, and then she wakes up and she goes to like fight him one last time, and she's the one who like is like stopping him while they escape, and she dies, allowing them to escape with her son. That would actually be, that might have made for a better film. But again, this was the 90s. This was Harvey Weinstein. This was Miramax, and I know that they just kind of wanted more of the same, but a little bit different and more over the top. It's just kind of, it's dumb. Howard Stern was originally offered the role as Radio Shock jock Barry Sims, but turned it down. And I think it's because he was filming Private Parts at the time. which is the adaptation of his like memoir. But at the same time, like I could not see. I mean, I could like you could tell that that's who that Barry Sims is in stand-in for. It would have been awesome to have Howard Stern like play like that character because it's like, but at the same time, I feel like he's not the type of person that would come into like this with and be okay with like just being killed off. Like if it was, I feel like more of like now where it was like they were bringing it back and David Gordon Green and you had John Carpenter producing and stuff like that. I feel like then you would be able to get somebody like a Howard Stern to come on, but like back then, it especially in horror at the time, and then was not seen as it is now, and also that it was the sixth film also kind of puts people off because they're like it's the sixth film of a Halloween movie and it's a horror film, this and that. Back then, yeah, I could see why they would be like, it would have been like if it was maybe a few years later after Scream came out. That's why you could see like someone like LL Cool J play like the small part, and then later you'd see like people in like smaller parts, but here and there, coming for these films. But at that time, you probably wouldn't have seen that. The writer and filmmaker's intention with the script were to ultimately unveil that what had kept Michael Myers alive and his reasons for killing. They decided upon the Curse of Thorn angle, which is the concept that Myers had been under the influence of an ancient Celtic curse that drove him to murder all his family members in his bloodline. Once the task was completed, the curse would be passed on to another young child, which we see with Danny. That's why he's seeing the Man in Black. But then, like, is that part supernatural? Because I think because we see him in the house. Like, okay, because if you go off the theatrical cut, it's like it's more implied that he's like hearing these voices, but then also that he's actually there. But then, like in the producer's cut, I think it's more implied towards is that it's more supernatural than anything than Dr. Wynn like actually showing up and being there. I don't know. It when you had to when you're given the task of okay, these previous movies did this and they left in these plot threads of like, why is there a tattoo on his arm? Why is there a Man in Black? Why does he keep coming back? Why is he able to or why does he keep killing this and that? Like, who does he keep killing? You ultimately have to create, like, it has to move into something beyond the world and beyond rationale, right? So it moves into then obviously like, oh, he heard voices. Okay, but then who was the voices? And then you have to say, oh, well, it was the Man in Black because that's why he was there to break him out. Well, then, like, who's the Man in Black? Oh, he's actually Dr. Wynn, remember, from the first film? Like, it's a lot of, like, oh, okay, we have to connect it back, but, like, you didn't have to? I don't know. Like, I'll tell you when I get into my, like, final thoughts about all the films, but just, I mean, I do like the film, but the thing is, it's like there are a lot of like plot holes, and a lot of inconsistencies, and a lot of like hand wavy away. Like, all right, well, why does he do this? It's not really important. And I get that, like, it's not like that's not the important. I mean, it is when you make a movie about it that makes it more important. But like, I feel like Michael Myers is a little bit different from like Jason or Freddy in that he's not as supernatural, but the fact that you're trying to make him more supernatural kind of takes away from this person. And that's where we'll talk about it when we get later down the line. Danny's subplot is left unresolved. He was hearing voices, and it is implied that he is also targeted by the Thorn cult. In the early versions of the script, his storyline would actually be concluded with Danny stabbing Kara to death in precisely the same bathroom that Jamie took refuge. The studio deemed this ending too dark, and the script was rewritten. The final script has Dr. Wynn escaping at the end and kidnapping Danny, planning to turn him. This was meant to set up a seventh Halloween film, but this was scrapped in favor of providing closure. Both the theatrical and the producer's cut have Tommy, Kara, and Danny escaping with the baby. Honestly, that could have been a great jumping off point for a sequel, to move the series away from Michael Myers, because um, this is something I'm going to argue down the line. There's only so far you can take Michael Myers, because since he's so more grounded than the other slashers, it's harder to continue the story. And I think having that idea planted of, oh, what about Danny? Like, that could come back later in a sequel. Or at least you could have continued it with a sequel and have him, okay, it passes on to him, and now Tommy's the new Dr. Loomis, and they're trying to catch. I don't know, whatever. You could have done something, right, with it. But I think it's the fact that we just kind of move on from this in the next ones, which we'll see why and how. Yeah, that just kind of gets dropped from the series entirely. Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers was released on September 29th, 1995 in the United States and brought in just over $7 million during its opening weekend gross. Coming in second to the serial killer thriller Seven, being the first film in the series to be on par with Halloween 2's opening weekend gross. Both Halloween 4 and 5 had earned under $7 million. The film went on to gross a total of $15 million at the box office from an estimated $5 million budget. And so with that, Myers was back in a big way that a COD hadn't seen for the franchise in a while. Although the critical and audience reception was overwhelmingly in the negative, he started looking to the future. Next, we'll see how The Shape will adjust to meta horror. For now, let's just move on to the kill counter. Kill counter. So with 3 new entries, not including the producer's cut, we have more kills. The 4th installment gave us 16 kills. The attendee and the paramedics are killed first. Next, a mechanic and a waitress are killed at a gas station and eatery. Bucky, the guy at the power station, is electrocuted to death by a transformer. Deputy Pierce is found ripped apart. Ted Hollister is shot to death by the posse. Logan and Kelly are killed while protecting Jamie. Logan is found dead by Kelly, who's then stabbed with a shotgun by Michael. Brandy has his neck broken. And posse members Orrin, Alan Unger, and Earl are taken out by Michael. Myers ups the death in revenge with 20 kills. The Hermit is killed off first. So much for trying to help someone out. Am I right? Next, Rachel, unfortunately, is stabbed in the chest with scissors. Mike, not Myers, gets stabbed in the head with the garden claw. And let's see, in the barn, Spitz is stabbed through the back with a pitchfork, and Samantha is slashed with a scythe. Deputy Nick and Deputy Tom are found dead. Tina is stabbed in her chest with a knife. Deputy Eddie is beaten to death in his car, and Deputy Charlie Block is hanged. Max Hart and Patsy West are killed off screen. We don't see how they are killed. Jamie finds Sheriff Meeker, Sheriff Tony, and 6 other cops all shot by the Man in Black. So as we move into the 6th installment, we have 8 for the producer's cut and 17 for the theatrical cut. I'll go over the kills that are in both and then move on to the ones that are different. First, there was the nurse, Mary. She was impaled through the head against a wall spike. Next is the truck driver. He gets his neck twisted, cracked open in the theatrical cut. Jamie gets impaled onto farm equipment and mulched. She gets shot in the head, though, by Terrence Wynn after Deborah's death in the producer's cut. Deborah Strode is slashed with a hatchet, and John Strode is stabbed and electrocuted. His head explodes in the theatrical cut. Barry Sims is stabbed twice and gutted. Once Tim and Beth get back to the Myers house, Michael first kills Tim by stabbing him in the throat and armpit. Beth gets stabbed in the back multiple times. So from here on, the kills are from the theatrical cut. There's a random asylum lady who's stabbed in the stomach. Dr. Terrence Wynn, Dr. Bonham, and about 4 unnamed cult doctors are stabbed and slashed with surgical machete. And finally, an unnamed cult doctor has their head slammed through the metal bars. So with that, let's move on to my final thoughts. The Halloween franchise seemed to be dead, but just like Myers himself, it just keeps coming back. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, stands out as a well-remembered entry. Having to bring back Michael and trying to give a continuation of the story was not an easy task, especially when you have to win back the audience after the third film. I really love the story and the characters. The idea of Michael trying to kill his bloodline is a good enough way to bring everything back. The mask isn't the best. It is very fake and plastic looking. I do think it works though for the film. The acting is pretty good. Allie Cornell and especially young Danielle Harris are standouts. Honestly, this is one of my favorites. I wouldn't put it like super high, but I mean it's still one that I remember watching as a little kid a lot. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, is a mess of a movie. Let's be honest. Othan and Gerard came in like a wrecking ball and threw away scripts and even rewrote parts. There were times on set when no one knew what was going on. I love Deborah Hill and miss her, but recommending Othan and Gerard was the worst decision she made. The story completely forgets the previous ending, kills off one of the likable leads early, adds a lot of strange things like the telepathic connection, and just leaves plot threads for someone else to have to not only connect to any sequel, but also back to the originals. I used to like this entry, not as one of my favorites, but just like general like for the film. Since learning more and more of the behind the scenes, I just ask myself, why? Why would the producers allow the director to make such baffling decisions? Why would they allow the script to go through constant rewrites? Why not stop and think through of everything? I think it hurts more as a huge Halloween fan that they really dropped the ball with this entry. And the fact that they just didn't just stop and say, you know what, maybe we should wait till let's get our ducks in a row and then come back and we can make a great film. But no, Akkad just rushed everything in and through. Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, is also a mess, but in a better way. I know, I gave the previous one a lot of shit, but I think that knowing that a real life monster was involved and that was like the reason for this mess kind of helps. Harvey Weinstein let 14-year-old boys dictate the film, instead of sticking closer to Ferran's original script, the one Donald Pleasance initially signed on to. We also have an alternate version of this film, which is a tiny bit better. It makes a little bit more sense, but still has problems. The ending is a letdown, though it is more due to Pleasance passing before they could do any reshoots. This was the first Halloween film to be released when I was alive. I remember seeing that first teaser for Halloween 666, the origin of Michael Myers as a kid, and getting like so excited. This is the movie I loved to watch as a kid and now. Although I think I prefer the producer's cut just a little bit more. It has its many faults, but I still love it. And the producer's cut, we finally get a version that may have been. Also, I think Michael Myers, this mask is one of the masks I think of. Like when I think of Michael Myers, I think of like this one, and I'll get to a ranking of the masks probably way into the last episode. But this is one of the better ones. Overall, the Thorn trilogy is a fun run of movies. It has its bumps and it has its hiccups, but overall, these are 3 great movies to watch with popcorn on a Saturday night, or more importantly, during the Halloween season. I give these 3 films 2 thumbs up. So now we have 3 more films down, 7 more to go. Thank you all for taking this journey with me. This was my longest script to date, and I feel like the podcast is moving in the right direction. Thank you all for listening to this new episode of Out from the Horror Box. This episode has taken a lot of work through the last couple months, so thank you for bearing with me. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe so you will get every new episode downloaded. Also, spread the word about us as much as you can. The more people who listen and subscribe, the more episodes I'll be able to put out into the world. Do you have any suggestions for reviews or content? Or would you want us to read some of your scary stories, be they fact or fiction? You can always email us at horrorboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can send me a message through Instagram at horrorboxpodcast for reviews, for content, news, your personal stories, anything. But till next time, we'll see you next episode and discover what comes out from the horror box.
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.